I'm Monica Johnson with Marshall Weber, and this is Booklyn Calling. Welcome to our show, where we talk about artists, libraries, and social justice. Marshall and I are both artists who head up Booklyn Inc., an artist nonprofit located in Brooklyn, New York, on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape people. And we created Booklyn Calling to amplify the voices within the artist book field, and to explore art making as a tool for community engagement and for social change. And today we're really excited to have two members of the collective Mobile Print Power here to talk with us. They are a multi-generational printmaking collective based in Central Corona in Corona, Queens, which is New York City. They started as a weekly printmaking and political education workshop at Immigrant Movement International, also known as IMI Corona. That was in March 2013. And over time, as the regular participants in the workshop began to emerge as co-facilitators and co-organizers and began to refer to themselves as a collective. And since 2013, they've been using a methodology for participatory design in public spaces that includes 2 portable silkscreen printmaking carts to engage communities and to explore social and cultural situations. Can't wait to hear about that. To transmit the work that they co-create with the community, they make books and prints and public sculptures. And each project they do reflects their commitment to social justice and their belief in the value of shared artistic production. And so the occasion of talking with Mobile Print Power today is that this winter, Booklyn and Mobile Print Power is launching a brand new box set collection that includes prints and other ephemera. No spoilers or anything, but it does include candy and fake money and Polaroids and silk screens. And the ephemera also describes the group's history and its practice through almost now 10 years. And it's quite a big project undertaking, as I understand it, because a lot of new thinking and question asking was undertaken by the group. And so a lot of really new parts of the process have been documented. And I can imagine this is an important benchmark in the group's progress in history, given that we're at a different point in the pandemic and, any cultural production kind of has taken a new shape. But let me say hello. This is Jose Benitez and Jess Epstein. Hi, Jose and Jess.
Hello.
Hello.
So Jose and Jess, we were just talking about how we wanted to start. And I really am in love with the 8 principles that I've come to know as the group's sort of guiding infrastructure or framework. And so Jose and Jess are going to read those to us, and then we'll take the conversation from there.
I'll do the first one. So we're Mobile Print Power. We have 8 principles. The first one is we engage ourselves to the task at hand.
We value the skills, knowledge, and experiences of all people, regardless of age or formal education.
We honor all community traditions and respect all community voices.
We recognize that dignity has no nationality, and we oppose racism.
We want equality across the gender spectrum, and we oppose sexism.
We reject violent words and violent actions.
We value all forms of written, spoken language and other forms of communication.
We believe in the power of collaborative and collective work.
We are Mobile Print Power.
Jose and Jess, I would love for you to sort of introduce yourselves and how you got involved with Mobile Print Power, and if there's a past and a present version of how that's evolved. I'd love to hear about that.
The way I put it is, I was a senior in high school. I liked graphic design, graphic novels, and art making in general. And I had 3 friends, Jennifer, Laurel, and Brandon, that were already members of Mobile Print Power. And they invited me to a meeting one week. And ever since, I've never stopped going.
I got involved with Mobile Print Power in 2015. I went to an event at PS1 that was put on by Naturally Occurring Cultural Districts. There were a number of organizations there, including Mobile Print Power, and I really just liked the work that the group was doing. And at that time, I was really used to like traditional structures of nonprofit community arts organizations. So my approach was like, oh, how can I volunteer? And, you know, the reaction from some of the collective members was like, well, you just gotta start showing up. So kind of like Jose, I just started showing up, and it's been, yeah, I mean, 2015, I can't believe, like 7 years. So that's sort of my journey into it by way of like a longer personal background and interest in arts education and community engagement.
Thank you for sharing that. And maybe for the listeners who might be just dipping into this conversation and going, wow, this sounds really great. Like Mobile Print Power, they're, you know, I like these people. I like how they got involved. I love their principles. What they might benefit from knowing, like, what is Mobile Print Power? For anybody who just doesn't know, like, what Mobile Print Power is, like, how would you describe that if someone were to ask you point blank?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can only really answer for myself, and so maybe Jose, feel free to jump in too. But you know, for me, Mobile Print Power is a little bit fluid. I think first and foremost, we're an arts collective that operates in like a horizontal structure, and we are multi-generational. It's a little funny to me that we're a couple minutes into this conversation and we haven't really said anything in Spanish. You know, those principles that we wrote are in English and in Spanish, and that's, you know, we're bilingual and we try to be as inclusive of language as possible. But we work with the community in various ways, like you said. So a lot of our work is based around questions and is circumstantial depending on the work that we're doing and who we're working with and which spaces those are in. So it's kind of a tough answer. But I think right now, Mobile Print Power is also in a process of evolution. Like you mentioned, this box set has been something that was a big undertaking and is still ongoing for us. And so the pandemic shifted a lot of the work that we do because so much of it was public facing. It was taking our silkscreen cart out into the community and doing workshops with people either in the streets, in parks, and community spaces, and a lot of that shut down. So now we're evolving again, and we're trying to, I think, figure out what we are and what we look like, how we want to move forward in the next couple of years, and what works best for the people who are participating in building this collective.
And I'll add two more things quickly about what I think Mobile Print Power is. I would say it's just a place where we just like hang out, make designs, get paint on our clothes, and just chill in my head. But also for me, I can speak personally. Um, for myself and some of the other younger members that joined the same time I joined, we kind of entered more Print Power, transition from high school to adult life and college. So like our relationship with Mobile Print Power helped shaped and form our connection to the art world and in New York City in general.
Could you talk about what the meetings looked like in person before the pandemic, and like just kind of, you know, give us an idea of what that felt like, or what kind of the building blocks were? What did you do there? Where was the place? How many people showed up? And then maybe describe a little bit about how the virtual meetings look or feel at this point.
So it'll just be either like a long row of two tables connected with like a lot of white chairs next to it, books everywhere, pencils. Someone's probably playing music. Patrick's running around trying to get paint. People are messaging people where they are because they might be running late. The train's jammed. We have new people that are just sitting down quietly, not knowing what's happening. We are telling a new person to come downstairs and pick up paint. They're like, what's downstairs? We're like, just come. It's fine. It's a mixed bag of people that always show up, our core members, new people that drop by. Sometimes a random family drops by, like the mom, the dad, and the two kids. Then we had to transition the language from English to Spanish. So it's a lot of running around, figuring stuff out, but at the end of the day, focusing on introducing ourselves, what we're working on, and how they can join. And if they want to do more work, we're more than willing to give the new people more work to help us out.
And where did the meetings take place?
It's in Corona, off the 7 train, like a 10-minute walk from 103rd Street. And when we're not meeting there, it's usually either we host public meetings in other cultural institutions around the city. So sometimes, as you mentioned before, we'll be doing public art workshops, Interference Archive. We'll be doing different museums. We had PS21, I believe, recently. Or not PS21, but another collaboration we did recently.
I just think it's so interesting that, like, when I think of mobile print power, the images are what come to mind. The artwork is so beautiful, you know, and I really hope that we make space to talk about what these aesthetic choices, what the design choices mean to the group, how you've come to them. You know, I'm looking at an image of like 4 fists with like kind of little sparkly emanations coming off of them, you know, symbolizing solidarity and group solidarity. And then I'm also looking at, on my wall right next to me, is this awesome screen print with glow in the dark ink of a blue creature with a brain with one big eye on it, holding their hands up and like I don't know what that symbol is when you have the pinky and the forefinger and the thumb out.
The love sign in ASL.
So love with ASL, and it has like eyeballs and eyelashes on each hand. And then for the feet, there are hands for the feet, and they're clutching pencils and paper, and their hands are up in the air with the mobile print power, you know, group solidarity symbol. And it's like, this is one of my favorite things in the world. And it's only an edition of 20.
Someone's a monthly sustainer.
Somebody is. And it's just to say, like, there's so much love and beauty and joy and playfulness and togetherness in the imagery that the group produces and shares with the world. And so if this isn't the exact moment, I am mindful that I want to ask Marshall what he was about to say. But I want that to hang in our heads as we pursue all these other ways of understanding what mobile print power is.
I think when it gets down to it, it is about kind of home and community. And I wanted to talk about just the process right before the art was made, because what always impressed me about mobile print power is the collective and collaborative commitment to making art isn't limited to the group. Like, you very often interface with the public, and the public becomes part of the art making. And so I'm wondering if both of you could talk about that, you know, generous kind of loving extension of creativity to where you're interfacing with people on the streets or people in all these projects, and the art itself is made collectively and collaboratively, both within and without the, you know, the boundaries of the initial collective group.
I as you're asking about that, I have this like memory from one of the public workshops that we did at the Brooklyn Museum as part of their Target for Saturdays, you know, many years back. And, you know, this was at a time when, you know, there were a lot of actions going on in terms of immigrant rights in this country. And we had a question in one of our collecting books that was about displacement. And I think the questions that we write, we often try to think about how could many types of people and ages answer these. And I remember this parent and their child came up to the book, and first of all, parents always think like, oh kid, you do it, and they never get involved, and so we always have to tell them like, no, it's for you too. But I remember the question about displacement, this little kid drew you know, a picture of a crib or something, and then we asked them about it, which if someone wants to answer, that's great. If not, that's totally fine too. And they just said like, I remember feeling displaced when my little brother was born or something like that, which like is kind of this, I mean, it is sad, but it also to me is just like emblematic of the way that when we think of these questions and we interface with the public, we're sort of not always anticipating, but we're thinking about them in a particular way. And so the responses that you get from people, especially in working with, you know, anyone who might walk up to your table or to the cart with us, is like, we never know what's going to happen. And so like those things stand out to us then when we come back as a group to start making the graphic imagery based on what we collect in those books. And I just kind of have always found that like a little funny twist, at least for me, and in the way that I think about the work.
Back when Mobile Print Power was part of Engaged Editions, I believe it was curated by Amy Lusty. It was definitely organized by Amy Lusty. And you guys had put together your infamous chill space. I think it's called Chill Space. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I was chilling in the chill space on the blanket with the pillows because I likely was tired from the long, tedious workday of emailing. And you happened to be there. And I guess I had never connected like what these books were. And you were just like, open it and draw something. And it felt so like, even as somebody who identifies as a visual artist, who is a drawer, I felt kind of scared, like really intimidated to do it. But you're just like, here, pencil, draw. Like just kind of launched me into the confrontation of doing it. And I ended up spending like an hour, maybe just like drawing ideas. And so that was a major click in my head of like, oh, I understand. This is a modality that you guys, or a technology that you guys have developed for yourselves to like gather feedback. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, maybe Jose, you can talk about like how the book kind of came to become part of the way that you're doing this collectively made work. And yeah.
Totally. Well, first, let me paint a picture of the chill space.
Okay.
So you have like a corner of a wall. Sometimes we artificially make with drywall with like blankets and designs all on them. On the floor, you have a blanket of all our designs on them also, and a shelf with just books. And we implore people to sit down and relax for a minute. So that's great. Also, this is the second time someone's told me that I've done this thing where I just throw a book at them, have them draw, and they just do it and lose themselves in it. One of our members, Max, he saw us at a protest, and he came to our weekly meetings, and immediately I did the same methodology I did with you. Where I was like, here's the book, draw something, I believe in you, you got this. And since then, he stuck around. It was a high stakes, like, design this thing for his public project for a lamppost in the garden. He's like, you're trusting me, you just met me right. I'm like, yes. But the books themselves, so I say more print power, we have two types of books. We have like one book, which is our more refined book with all just designs and graphics on them. And then we have like the blueprint book, like the book where all the designs come from. And they're usually like these big books that sometimes Patrick sews together. They have a question in English and Spanish. And it could be like how Jess mentioned, when have you felt displaced? In both English and Spanish, and inside we make people draw or write their answers. And I think one good thing about the book and going to public spaces is that we might never see these people again, and they don't have to write their name or attach their name to their artwork or their thoughts. So there's kind of like a feeling of they could say what's actually on their mind or draw anything they wouldn't share publicly with anyone. I think that's like a key aspect of like the book itself. It's like a diary.
Yeah, it's a diary that we then read as a group later.
Yeah. It's like a live journal.
Yeah.
And what do you do with them?
That's how we generate our designs. We look at the books, what people write, what they draw, and we see common themes and ideas of like the general publics, and then make designs based off that question and those answers.
How many books are there, and where are they?
They're like in a storage facility somewhere in the Bronx, I believe, and some of them are in Patrick's house. Some other ones are in the Bronx Museum, probably. Some are probably Jess's closet right now.
Do you have any idea of like how many you've amassed over the last 9 years?
There should be over 100 by now.
Wow.
Oh yeah, I would imagine a lot more, because I feel like every workshop we did, we would have at least like three or four at a table. Yeah. So there's a lot of them.
And I was gonna add too, you mentioned our style. I think one of the main things that incorporate our style is the public generated graphics, but also, as Jess mentioned, most parents just like, they don't throw their kids at us, but they look at us, they think it's arts and crafts, so the kids are mostly the ones that draw in the books. And kids will draw anything, even if it doesn't make sense. And we love that.
Well, it just seems to me it'd be great to have a public institution have the archive of your books so that they could be centralized and available to people to look at, because I'm sure they're amazing and they document this incredible ongoing process.
This might be a spoiler, but I think in the box sets, there's some like photos of like designs people drew in the books that eventually
Wow.
you could see how it becomes a final graphic, or how the final
Oh,
graphics is inspired
nice.
by.
Spoiler.
So cool. Wait, and I mean, this might be a little granular too, but do you guys make the books or do you buy them? Where do you the books come from?
We make them. Like Jose said, one of our members, Patrick, usually fabricates them in his home or office studio.
And you also have your edition books that are, books of artwork, usually on kind of a topical theme, and those are amazing also. And you've done a lot of those are project based, if I'm not mistaken, that they're generated from specific projects. I'm wondering if you could talk about those.
Yeah, they're all by hand designed, silkscreen printed by one of us or all of us, and hand sewed, I believe, or either used with a staple gun. I forget which one. But I believe in my first actual meeting with Mobile Print Power that my friends made me go to, we were printing books for Streetwise, and it was the edition books too. And Patrick just threw the squeegee at me, was like, "Get to printing." I'm like, "This is for like final edition book, and you're trusting me, who's never done silkscreen printing." He's like, "Just do it 3 times to get the hang of it."
But that's all interesting because there's something about the collective and the collaborative when you get rid of authorship, when you get rid of kind of that burden of individual identity that saturates the kind of corporate art world. There's really a large space to work in, right? It's not just anonymity; it's the fact that that you're part of something else. So your name doesn't matter as much. And then for people who have kind of issues in terms of their name being used publicly, for instance, that's no longer an issue either. But I think there's something supportive about making that collaborative environment. I mean, otherwise you throw the pencil at people and they're just going to kind of walk away. If the intentionality isn't there, throwing a pencil at someone in the chill space is pretty chill. Like they're already ready. They're already chilling. You're giving them the pencil.
I mean, for me, like that stands out completely. Like that was part of the appeal for me. I'd had a practice as, an artist in high school. I didn't go to art school. And by the time I was in my like early mid 20s, I was just like, I really miss this, but I'm too scared. Like I was scared to put myself out there. And so having Mobile Print Power allowed me to kind of like tap into that creative side of myself without having to feel like I was putting too much, like taking too much of a risk. And it provided like a community for me to engage with artwork in a way that I wanted to, but also to like expand my own practice as an artist.
So one thing I wanted to mention was that Mobile Print Power has a chapter in Booklyn's book, Freedom of the Presses, that addresses a lot of those issues that Jose and Jess were just talking about, like this, operating collectively, operating collaboratively. And, I was the editor of that book, and I just thought I had to have Mobile Print Power in that book because you can't have a book called Freedom of the Presses that doesn't include a organization that has a press that actually is mobile and is freed from any space and can actually travel around the city. I think that was like a great reality, but also a great symbol of freedom, like the epitome of freedom of the presses. So in that chapter, you talked a lot about the process, and the book was published in 2018, I think, and you were talking about kind of 2015 through 17 mostly. And has things changed since that time in terms of the group or the practice or the process or the output?
I don't believe much has changed because immediately after we did those conversations in those books, the pandemic happened. So I would say one thing that did change was the way we engage with our press. We changed from silk screen printing to like linographing at home, sending each other boxes of like lino to carve. And so trying to make a press at home, all of us with like oil paints, making postcards, like ruining our desk and our clothes. But the press did change given the pandemic and us instead of publicly facing, just holding stuff down on Zoom. But regarding like authorships and like freedom of design and all that, I believe those conversations are always ongoing within the group. And it's something as we say a lot of times, it takes a lot of time for us to make decisions because there's like 8 brains trying to like man this one collective.
So I have a question. Well, let me rephrase that. You had a question that you asked yourselves that I'm just going to flip right back to you and say it out loud. And what I mean by that is it's one of the questions that you included in the box set, which is like kind of you asked yourself a series of 7 questions, and the 8th element was a statement. And these are fantastic, and I will not read them all straight through. I'll include these in the show notes because I think they're excellent. But this question I'm going to flip back to you to ask you to answer, I think has tension in it. Well, I certainly see tension in it. But it is, what is our place in the art world, capital A, capital W, and what is our place in the community? I also would like to just tack that onto what we've been talking about, which in part is about authorship. And the ways in which Booklyn has been engaged with, in some ways are not entirely within the collective's control. So I know that, you've collaborated with the groups that are within the art world. You've collaborated with groups who might be identified more popular as community groups or have more like community investments. And I think in the toggling of those spaces, and as much as we assume those are 2 different spaces, which is totally an argument that you've made, what types of friction have you confronted and resolved as a group? And can you answer that with a little bit of awareness of how that might relate to the authorship of the graphics or the authorship of the group, meaning who gets credited with the group's work most often?
In the art world, I think some frictions that would happen sometimes is as a multi-generational group, many art communities or art institutional sectors in New York City are used to form hierarchy. And when talking to us, they'll default to that form of hierarchy. And sometimes that will cause friction, especially when we were much younger, like high school or like just out of just starting college. Most of the correspondence will either go straight to Patrick or be Patrick Rowe and the Mo Print Pirate kids on emails, and we're like, why Mo Print Pirate kids? It's the conversations like that, but also I think one part, I don't know if we really speak on it on the book, but sometimes speak internally. A lot of art cultural institutions in New York City are predominantly white, and we are multi-generational and also multiracial. So a lot of us going to these public spaces, that sometimes that is present, and we acknowledge that, especially with some projects, but also how we talked about those issues. Who do people prioritize first in their hierarchy? Like, they talk to Patrick first. He's the older cis white man in the group. Why did it go straight to him first? And trying to break down those hierarchies and how we collaborate with groups and people and how we like conduct ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's like been the predominant issue that we've faced over the years. And I mean, it's really layered. Like, on the one hand, if you think about the kind of age, the multi-generational aspect of it, like, um, at that time when I first started, I was out of college and a lot of the other people were still in high school or earlier on. And so we are brought up in these systems of hierarchies. And so questions would come up of like, well, can you do this? Can you make this happen? And I feel like from the perspective of being older in the group, it was always like, you can do it, like, you don't need to have me to be the one to reach out. I can help, but I absolutely, like, the power is in your hand. It's not my choice to make. So I think, like, internally that was a time where we got to flex the opportunity of living outside of these structures that are often placed on us as people of different ages. And then, like Jose is saying, we would come up to institutions, and every institution or organization within the art world would approach us differently. And sometimes we had relationships, like actual relationships with institutions or organizations. And so we knew people and they knew us as a collective and understood how we worked. Other times we were kind of like hired to appear, I guess, and be present, or sort of like have our work and collaboration be there, but not have the work be even credited. That question of crediting in our work is interesting, but like not even necessarily have our work be credited properly as a collective, let alone any sort of individual who had maybe a more forward leaning role in it. And so that came up over the last couple of years. I think, like, with all of these varieties, there's, city institutions would, we would get a grant to do a project. We thought we were doing one thing, and then we realized, like, it actually had harmful impacts on the community. So that was something we had to reckon with. So it's really challenging in terms of like what our place is within those two intersecting things of art world versus community, and how they do overlap versus see one another as separate from time to time.
Yeah, I think it's a really complicated issue, and but I think there are really positive aspects of it that mobile print power embodies. And from my perspective, New York City is, yeah, it's the center of the corporate art world, but it's also kind of its own center for this community and alternative and underground art world. And I've always been interested in collective and collaborative groups. So there's, groups that are more political, groups that are more social, groups that are more focused on the artwork. But I think mobile print power is part of this New York City alternative tradition. It's like an alternative art history, and it's the lines between community and art and politics kind of get blurry, but it's a pretty substantial part of our cultural legacy. And you mentioned the Young Lords in your text, and you could even go to the music industry and think about Wu-Tang Clan. You can go back to the art world and think about Group Material and the Guerrilla Girls. So these are all really successful collectives, collaborative groups. And I think mobile print power is part of that history. And I think that's really important.
And maybe just, because Marshall knows I'm going to reference this at some point, Jose, when you were, talking about how, some people will think of it as like, Patrick Rowe and the printmaking kids, that just reminded me so strongly of like Tim Rollins' Kids of Survival, which, if anyone's listening, you either know about it or you can Google it, but was a kind of a flash in the art world. It was centered. I mean, I can't be like super knowledgeable about it. I'm not expert, but it was a project that was undertaken in the South Bronx. But I can imagine there are moments that, depending on, from what communities or institutions you're coming from, you might just assume that mobile print power is existing within that legacy, as opposed to some of the ones that you name on your site, which are the Black Panther Party and the Young Lords, and maybe some of the other ones that Marshall mentioned. But I wondered if Jess and Jose, if you wanted to, are there other influences or even like, inroads to how you guys function that you personally feel are part of, a legacy of group work?
I can speak on a little bit, like to group work and how we like conduct ourselves. I think Jess mentioned it briefly on not the friction, but there's always a friction because we're always evolving and growing, and many of us are young and growing at the same time. Where if we wanted to do events or we're interested in some events or people are reaching out, Patrick and Jess, like who's interested in this event, and they would offer support but have us like fully handle the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
Like at one point we're all like 19, 18, and 20 trying to like run an international like art practice space and ally media conference. And Pat and Jess are just in the corner chilling, going like, we're not going, but we'll help you write the stuff and like edit your work. And it's just the rest of the five of us stressed out.
But you guys had an amazing time, I will say.
We got the work done. But there's always been that friction, or if there be people reaching out to us specifically, like we want the more Print Power kids or the teens, or there's like a teen event. Patrick
can
and
we
Jess,
hire you to just come and do it?
There was the teens take the High Line, and they reached out, and we were interested in it. And Pat and Jess were just like, "Well, we're not teenagers."
I think there was an age limit, Jose. Like we were literally too old. Yeah, obviously tension comes out of that.
Yeah. No, I can see that. I mean, I feel like I've picked up on some of it, and to be fair, it's like there, in my experience stepping into the mobile print power space, I do have a feeling like whatever it is you're doing, I just want you to do it over and over again. And I think what you, offer any inquiry that is just that blind of like, I love what you do. Can you come do what you do? I think the way your mechanisms for doing it help to educate people on what it is that you're actually doing versus what it is that it looks like you're doing, which is, I think, what people like to lean into the most instinctively. But I think the way that you handle it also it feels like that's part of your work. It's the waves that come out of it is what people learn through the process of you responding to those inquiries.
Yeah, and I was going to add also, something that also helped us, I guess, a lot of us younger members, me, Jennifer, and Brandon, and I believe Haley at the time, were also part of EMI Corona, which is then a Center Corona's like leadership council. And that was also another multi-generational space of leadership. And we did have like some political education training on how to handle those type of works and conversations. So that was like in the back burner while we're also participating in more print power.
Yeah, and I think out of that too, Jose, we also came up with like the things that people don't see, Monica, like you're saying. Like we as a collective, I mean, we haven't even revisited this in a long time, but we don't really engage with projects unless we have a minimum of 3 of our members available and interested in participating, because it is collective based. And so we need each other's support in order to move forward with a project. And so that kind of plays into also what those dynamics look like and the support that we get from one another.
That also came from a place of like friction of people feeling burnt out from doing several events by themselves or just with 2 people.
Totally.
And us having conversations that the minimum would be like 3 people at like a public event, because sometimes it gets too overstimulating.
It can be a lot. And you guys are going with like, at times, with a whole screen printing setup and answering questions and changing out paint and mixing it and then dealing with problems and, introducing a lot of people to screen printing who've never done it before. So you're educating, you're project managing, you're doing so much. So 3 seems like kind of the minimum number you'd want to roll with. I'd like to turn to the box set for a minute. Because I imagine to a certain extent, this podcast might be, a support or informative to like, someone who may be looking at the box set within a classroom, at the institutions that these will eventually find their way to. And I wonder if, on the one hand, I just want to hear about what that process was, because I know, way back when a lot of us jumped on a Zoom call and we were like, what is this box set project? What could it look like? And what would the components be? And so I kind of, spoke on behalf of what Booklyn does in terms of like supporting the creation of these projects to just help like what the goals are, where it typically ends up, or what our archival / activist lens is, which is, use as preservation. But what you pulled together, I feel like, wasn't just what I was expecting, which was just like, oh, what materials do we have in our collection and how can we curate what we already have that will sort of tell the story of mobile print power. But what you actually did is you made yourself a whole new project. And I sort of want to ask you, why did you do that? What, it's like, on the one hand, I'm always thinking, why did you make more work for yourself? But, you obviously benefited from it. And I think this is part of your practice, is that you lean into these opportunities to work together to make more of your work. So could you talk a bit about like, why did you choose this road? Maybe some insights and like, well, maybe we wouldn't do it that way now.
I'll say, I think we took the box set project as like an introspective of us as a collective at the given moment, but also of like the past 9 years, close to 10 years.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think, you mentioned it was 2021. I was just like kind of furiously searching through my inbox thinking, because I feel like it was longer than this. And maybe it's something that was happened casually in conversation, but we've had this idea in the back of our heads. And then, we've alluded to it a couple times. Things shifted so much for us during the pandemic that doing this box set allowed us the opportunity, like Jose said, to be introspective and to kind of like think about all of the work that we've done and where we want to go from here. And it also, Jose just mentioned a couple minutes ago, we were able to just host a workshop at PS 122 in the East Village and look through the box set and use it as an opportunity to facilitate a workshop around what we do. And hopefully that it becomes a way for other people to, in the same way that we drew inspiration from other groups, like you mentioned, the Young Lords or Black Panthers or other artists. Hopefully they'll take our methodology and use it in spaces in their own way.
I also like to add on, I do believe after those meetings, we had like an internal mobile power meeting where we're like, okay, what do we want this box? This is our box. What do we want? And then we're like, podcasts, photos, Polaroids.
Yeah.
Okay, and then that leads me to go, okay, what's up with the M&Ms? Because you obviously said we want M&Ms in there.
We
what
need
are the
them.
M&Ms? What is that?
The M&Ms
M&Ms.
The M&Ms preclude both Jose and I.
They're a senior member.
Yeah, they like are from the very first workshop that Mobile
Are
Print
they
Power
archival
did.
M&Ms?
They don't last so long. It's sort of just like a replica.
There is,
Yeah.
we did do, we had a vitrine at our exhibition at Interference Archive many years ago, and there was the original M&M in there. So, like, who's to say which M&Ms are getting?
Are they there because they, like, you needed to have snacks that would, like, sustain the energy required?
Yes.
Is that it? Okay.
They're lucky.
Okay.
They're lucky.
The lucky M&Ms. And then I see, like, faux currency, which is such a great thing to talk about nowadays too. But so there's mobile print power exchange for print instruction. Is that currency that you created?
Yeah.
How did that get used?
I think you usually get to use when we're in public spaces, because sometimes it's hard to manage who actually wrote in the book, who we're letting print. Because I think one of the main things we focus on is an exchange with community members.
Uh-huh.
And it's we will teach you the process of silk screen printing, and you will print something and you're able to keep it and leave this workshop with it. But as an exchange, we want you to help us generate graphics for our next public workshop, where we'll be teaching people also based on a design inspired by the responses in this book. So we will always like have people, usually people come towards us because it looks like an ice cream truck or like a hot dog truck.
Yeah.
And then we're like, it's art making. And they're like, oh, I'm already here. So we're just like, just draw something in the book. respond to it. It could be written, it could be a poem, it could be like a small phrase, it could be stick figures, it could be colorful, abstract. And once you're done with that and feel proud of it, we'll give you this faux mobile print power currency. And there's a little rippable tab where once they have the money, they present it to the member that's printing, and we just rip the tab and then teach them how to print. But sometimes we just don't even rip the tab anymore. We just, you can keep the dollar too. We'll teach you how to print. The dollar's enough. We know.
Well, what I totally love about that is that the mobile print power cart, which you were mentioning, like the cart that opens up and so you're actually printing on, on the cart. It does look like a street vendor cart. And it seems like in Corona, that's like super appropriate. Like that's part of the culture there. And it's interesting that it reflects, like why doesn't every street corner have a mobile print power cart along with the other food carts and all the, all the drink carts? It seems like that's the kind of future I would want to live in. And that seems like that's the kind of future mobile print power is creating, that just by putting forth that idea, it's almost like instant solidarity with the community. Like just that like I said before, this freedom of the presses, the press that can go around wherever it needs to be. But and there's actually some historical precedents for that I just thought of that I wanted to mention. There was a printer in France who, during the student revolutions in the 1968, he bolted a letter press to his pickup truck, and he would ride around to make prints and manifestos for whoever was speaking. Johannes Strugala, and he would drive around a process and say, "Oh, do you need a poster? Oh, do you need?" And he would set type in the back of his truck, and he would like print it up right there. And he would make posters at one event for meetings that came, and he would just print it all right there. So, I think those are like really wonderful and sort of revolutionary practices. So I like that idea of someone like running over to get a hot dog and going, "Oh, I'm going to learn how to make screen prints instead." Okay, well, there's still an exchange there. And I like that. There's that reflection of the community culture, like a vibrant street culture.
One thing I did want to mention too, that I was sort of reminiscing about with Marshall yesterday, is that at the exhibition at Interference Archive in 2016, which happened to be a few months after I had my first and only child. So I was a new parent, very exhausted, didn't know what the hell I was doing, and would visit Interference Archive quite a bit because it's in my neighborhood. My partner we're both volunteers there. And I spent a lot of time in the chill zone too. And I think maybe at that point I didn't draw anything in the books or even pay attention because I was so tired. But it was, just to add another accessibility, part of your art production model is like, I could be there with an infant, a new parent, and it just provided a place for me to relax. And it was a very comforting space to be in, to then contemplate the work that I was seeing. So I really deeply appreciate that. And it's sort of part of also my history of coming to know your work as providing space to relax and to look at artwork.
We haven't talked about it a lot, but I think that sometimes your work really addresses issues, especially of the Corona community or of the communities that you're invited to participate in, and do events. So anyone want to field, just describing a little bit of that kind of interface with the community, solidarity with the community, projects within the community?
I hate to keep saying this, but the pandemic really slowed us down in terms of that community work. Like, we are working actively to try to get back in the space. We've alluded to the challenge of scheduling as a collective and all those sorts of things, but I know that members of the group were recently together for just in-person printing in order to inspire ourselves to start working again in person and be with the community. So we're very, we've tried to support Centro Corona and the mutual aid work that they do throughout the pandemic. One of the projects that we did was called Propagate. I kind of talked about this earlier, and where we were working with a couple artists, and the money that was raised by people purchasing these postcards went to a few different places, to the artists who collaborated with us, to a mutual aid organization of their choosing, and then some of it went just into getting those supplies like Jose was talking about, the lino and, the ink for each of us to do our own cuts and then make the prints at home so we could edition postcards ourselves individually in a safe way during the pandemic. So we're working towards getting back to being in person. I think that our commitment really centers around Queens and around Corona specifically. And there have been times when our work has taken us to a lot of different places, but we always want to focus back in that route. And so I think it's an ongoing process where we're trying to be as engaged and part of the community as possible.
Yeah, I'd like to add on too. I think there's some moments where we're more focused in like the art world in New York City. And as Jess mentioned earlier, sometimes the art world and our community do collide. And how do we tackle those issues? There were a few moments where those collisions were really serious, and we did take a break as a group and reflected on our principles and went back to the 8 principles. What do we stand for? How do we conduct ourselves and hold true to both like our art practice and also our community? And since then, we've been more deliberate on who we collaborate with, what questions we make, and what goals do we want out of our collaborations, not just to collaborate with like a big institution, but how does this benefit our community also?
Is there anything that you might want to tell people just to say on behalf of the group or on behalf of your experience in mobile print power that you may not have had the opportunity to say recently or at all?
I can add something, Jess. I think it's not just us. As we mentioned, we asked ourselves questions in the box, and one of them is, do we like each other? Do we like hanging out? Are we friends? I believe it's the generalization of the question. It seems like a funny question, but it's also like a serious one. Like, why do we keep coming back to this work? There's very often times where each of us individually take like a sabbatical for a few months because it's just burnout. But also one refreshing part of the Zoom meetings, the weekly drawing sessions, was for me personally an escape from the mundaneness of the pandemic and being locked up at home and seeing familiar faces. And I was talking about like how are we dealing with it? What's happening? Are we all okay? And just having a fun space to play music on Zoom, sharing audio and just drawing. And through drawing, we're also talking about how the pandemic was affecting us and our community, and that's within our illustrations. So it was very therapeutic for me, myself. So beyond just making artwork, we really do value our interpersonal connections.
That's beautiful. And I noticed that you guys talk about, and you talk about love as part of the work that you do. And I think that's so wonderful and unique.
Absolutely agree with Jose on that. I'm glad he brought that up. I think that it's challenging, especially for both of us, and most of us now have been part of Mobile Print Power for a long time. And we've also talked about this a few times, like it takes a while for us to make work. The box set that we're really excited about, like it's been, like you said, Monica, we went big and it's been a process. Like it's a ton of work and multiple iterations of us, printing in person versus at home, conversations, podcast recordings are internally that then get translated to answers to these various questions we've talked about. And now we're in a phase of translating everything into Spanish. And, like Jose was just saying, we enjoy this and it's a break, but I feel like we also really support each other. Spanish is not my first language, but I'm bilingual and I'm not a translator, but I had volunteered to translate some of the portions of descriptions of our work. And Jose jumped in there and helped me out without me even having to ask. So it's that kind of support that I really appreciate and recognize is really special in the work that we do. Whereas, you know, in other settings, you're sort of constantly poking and prodding people to show up for you. Like, I think even in times when it's only one person who shows up to our workshop or two, we're all there for one another, and that means a lot.
The last comments were so solidly about some of the themes that I really appreciate in terms of the principles are, and in a lot of the other texts, there's a principle about just being wholly there, paying attention, bringing yourself fully and wholly to the task at hand, and to interacting with the group and interacting with the community. And I think that is really a beautiful concept, a beautiful principle. And I think it's been reiterated many times. And I think there's also an important principle about not tolerating violence and not having violent words, not using violent actions. And I think those two things are really interrelated. And I think I want to thank the both of you for really, I don't know, being fully here for this interview and for this podcast, because I think it's a good example of what I think lots of people love about mobile print power. And I know that even beyond Booklyn is totally excited about this box set, but there's a whole, I think our community is excited about this box set. So
absolutely,
that's really great. And it's really great to hear you give this kind of comprehensive backstory to that and to the group in general. So thank you so much.
And I also want to give a shout to just, other members of the group too, because I know it would be great to have more people on, but I'll just run through. I'll say, Jess Epstein and Jose Benitez, thank you so much for being here. But there's also Haley, Marissa, Max, Jennifer, Patrick, Brandon, Larone, Stephanie, and Eric. And there might be more, but this is the most recent list that I had. So I want to say thank you to all of you at Mobile Print Power. Also worth mentioning, if you are listening and you are a librarian or a special collections librarian or a curator at an education institution, and this is the type of thing that you are looking for your curriculum or for your research collections, please reach out to us, Marshall or Monica. You can reach us at hello@booklyn.org. I'm not sure when this podcast will come out, so I'll just venture a guess and say that you could probably find the box set, the Mobile Print Power box set, at booklyn.org. Let's hope and cross our fingers that we can edit this in time. And then also there's, I'll put a lot of stuff in the show notes, but you can reach Mobile Print Power through the miracle of Google. But mobileprintpower.com is the website, at mprintpower is their Instagram handle. And I think it's worth noting too that on your website, there's lots of free graphics to download that are just such a fun way to engage with the work that you do. And it's really easy in a snapshot to see how you do stuff on Instagram, because there's lots of images of the whole group in public spaces working. Thank you again, Jess and Jose, for joining us. And we'll see you next time on Booklyn Calling. Goodbye. This podcast was made possible in part by funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs and in partnership with the City Council, and from individual donors to Booklyn Inc. You can support this podcast by making a donation at booklyn.org/donate.